I'm sure he heard you, Rose. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, members. The first thing I'm going to do is ask if. Well, I will just quickly say that what we'll do for members of the public that have just joined us, that with this application, with all applications, what we'll do is the case officer will present the application. Members of the committee can then ask questions and points for clarification. We'll then go over to the speakers. That's objectives, supporters, parish council, and the local ward member. Again, after each one has spoken, members of the committee can ask for questions and for points of clarification. And after that, we'll move into the debate. During the debate, it'll be proposed and seconded for approval, refusal, or deferral, or site visit, whatever, and we'll take it from there. So without further ado, let's move on to first of all, I'll do a roll call from Miss Young to check that we're all here, and then we can start on application item 6C. Miss Young, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Abbott.
Present.
Councillor Brazil.
Present.
Councillor Foss.
Present.
Councillor Hodgson.
Present.
Councillor Holway.
Present.
Councillor Kemp.
Present.
Councillor Long.
Present.
Councillor Panel.
Present.
Pringle.
Present.
Councillor Rowe.
Present.
Taylor.
Present.
With the apologies from Councillor Brown, that's everybody here.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Miss Young. Right, we shall move to agenda item 6C, which is application 0385/21/HHO. Ms. Harrahane, over to you.
Right, thank you very much, Chairman. I'm aware of the morning you've all had, so I will try and keep this concise. So the application is Leo Home in Salcombe. So it is a two-storey dwelling in Allen Hayes Road in Salcombe. It's located within the conservation area. So as you can see from the conservation area map, the purple outlines the conservation area, and the site is just to the west here, so where this little extra purple dot is. So the property dates from the Edwardian period. It's built on the site of a former quarry and has had some alterations and extensions in the past, which are all detailed in the planning history of the site. So we've got a photo of the front of the site here, taken from the main road. This is the rear of the site, and then we have the site here just in the context of the street scene and neighbouring dwellings and how it's seen sort of from the highway. So as you can see from the existing elevations, the property has a hipped roof. It's a slate roof, and the proposal seeks to increase the ridge line of the roof to create a pitched roof with gable ends to the side elevations. To the front there would be two pitched roof dormers and a larger central dormer to the rear, and then we've got a couple of roof lights in the rear elevation and this central roof light here in the front. So the proposed works would allow for a bedroom and an ensuite to be created in the roof space. But I think it is important to note that you can see the red line here, which outlines the existing dwelling. So the height of the building would not be increased, it would stay the same. And all the works proposed are contained within the roof space, so the footprint of the dwelling would stay the same as well. So one of the key issues in my assessment of the application was the impact of the proposal on the conservation area. Obviously, you're all aware development in the conservation area must preserve or enhance the setting of the conservation area. So as I've detailed in my report, the Salcombe Conservation Area appraisal categorises 4 key areas of the conservation area. The site's located within the Victorian suburbs and Outer Environs character area. I've gone into a bit more detail about what this means in the report. So as you can see from the photos, I've got a few photos here just to show you the It's just sort of the character of the area, the street scene, the surroundings of the site. So where I've written site in red here, that means that the site's just off to the right of me. So you can see the odd sort of hipped roof. This blue property in the foreground here has a hipped roof. There's a very rare flat roof property that we've got here. But the vast majority of the properties within this part of the conservation area have pitched roofs, gables, and a lot of them have also had dormers added to the roofs. So officers are therefore satisfied that the proposed works, which would incorporate a pitched roof, a gables and some dormers, would meet the test of sort of preserving the characteristics of the conservation area and meet the requirements outlined in the Salcombe neighbourhood plan relating to development in conservation areas. The policy from the neighbourhood plan is set out in full in paragraph 1.2 of the officer report, along with sort of my comments on how I feel that it's addressed this part of it. So the applicants have also commissioned a heritage statement submitted with the application, which is available to view online, which also concluded that the proposal would conserve the conservation area character and accord with primary heritage legislation. So whilst the proposed alterations to the roof would change the appearance of the dwelling, officers feel that the symmetry and the proportions of the building would be retained. The dormers and the roof lights sit quite comfortably within the roof space. They're subordinate features to the original house, and the windows sort of are in line with the pattern of fenestration below. So this all sort of accords with the general sort of good design principles, and officers therefore conclude that the impact on the character and appearance of the building is acceptable. Concerns have been raised by some objectors, including the Town Council, that the proposal constitutes overdevelopment. As I've mentioned previously, the height and the footprint of the building are going to remain unchanged. And looking at it in the context of neighbouring dwellings, we've got Allen Hayes to the north here, which, as you can see, is higher than Lealholme. It also has a blank elevation facing the site. So the proposal is not considered to have an adverse impact on this property. To the south, we've got Eastern Grey, which is an apartment building. It's angled slightly away from Lealholme, so they don't actually face each other. They sort of look away from each other slightly. And I would also note that Eastern Grey has an extant planning permission to increase the height of these gables. So the central gable has planning permission to increase its height by 2.4 metres. So taking all this kind of into consideration, officers don't feel that the works result in overdevelopment or appear overly dominant in the context of the street scene or neighbouring properties. Excuse me. Officers would remind members that Lealholme is an unlisted property, so some of the objections are about the fact that the proposal would create a 3-storey house. There would be nothing to stop the owners of the house from creating space in the existing roof space and using it as living space. So I think it wouldn't be sort of a reason to warrant refusal the fact that it's creating a 3-storey dwelling. The property also benefits from permitted development rights. So if space were to be made within the roof, certain exterior alterations like putting in roof lights could be done without the need for planning permission. The conservation area appraisal and the neighbourhood plan both identify sort of buildings of historic impact, architectural importance. Lealholme isn't listed sort of as a building of this type in either of these documents. And just by way of conclusion, I think I would say the works are considered to respect the historic character of the street scene and the wider conservation area. The works wouldn't harm the amenity of neighbouring dwellings, and the design is considered to be acceptable, and the application is therefore recommended for conditional approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Harrahane. Members, any questions? Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. Yeah, did you say that the house at Eastern Grey has got permission to go 2.4 metres higher?
Yeah, the central gable has permission to go 2.4 metres higher, and then this
Okay,
gable on the
so
left
that would be,
side
yeah,
will be
all right, that would
1.5.
make,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, all right. Thank you.
Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question, Charlotte. As it's within the conservation area, I note there's no comment from any of the heritage officers. Will they ask for a view on this?
Yeah, I did informally speak with one of our heritage specialists about it. Their verdict was you could argue it either way, which wasn't massively helpful. So yeah, they could see sort of arguments for it and arguments against it.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Members, any more questions? No, in which case we will move on to the speakers. Sorry, just let me find my page. So, Mr. Alexander, if you're there, now's your time. You've got 3 minutes, and when your time is almost up, someone will whisper in your ear. Are you there, Mr. Alexander?
I am, yes.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. Lealholme is a well-preserved, detached Edwardian villa with an unadorned roof design, the only one of its kind in the Salcombe Conservation Area. This planning application does not preserve or enhance the conservation area as required by statute. It enlarges the roof and changes its profile, taking away the hipped roof feature of this particular Edwardian style. It creates 2 dormer windows and a large roof light at the front and a very large dormer at the rear, all of which detract from its authenticity and historic character. To quote from Objective 2 of the Salcombe Neighbourhood Development Plan, selection of appropriate forms such as roof details are critical ingredients of a successful development. This builds on the Conservation Management Plan, which states dormers need to be sympathetic to the building and the surrounding town seen from all viewpoints, and proliferation of roof lights could have a detrimental effect on the roofscape. The proposed dormer windows at the front are 50% larger than those of neighbouring Victorian properties, 1.8 square metres versus 1.2, and the large central roof light is equally not in keeping. The proposed rear dormer is massive, 2 metres wide by 3 metres high. Lealholme can be seen from a number of vistas, including being in the centre of a locally important view specifically identified on page 47 in the neighbourhood plan. In your officer's report, paragraph 1.2, which sets out criteria in the neighbourhood plan for development in the conservation area, is factually incorrect. It quotes criteria which apply outside the area, not inside, confusing paragraph 3 of the policy with paragraph 2. The significant parts that are missing are development should preserve and enhance the conservation area, and all projects should contribute positively to the area. This is a significant error. Paragraph 1.3 of the report says the area is typified by tall Victorian villas. That's correct. But conservation should not mean harming the authenticity of an Edwardian building by making it mock Victorian. Paragraph 1.5 says that pitched roof dormers are common, which is also correct.
30 seconds remaining.
But none of the Victorian homes are so heavily glazed as this proposal. In summary, the reasons for recommending approval, in my view, are flawed. This proposal does not meet the fundamental test in the neighbourhood plan supported by statute to preserve and enhance the conservation area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Members, any questions to Mr. Alexander? No. Thank you very much, sir. In which case we will move on to Ms. Metcalfe, who is speaking in favour of the application? Miss Metcalfe, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, members. I'm Catherine Metcalfe, a local heritage consultant with over 20 years' experience, and I speak on behalf of the applicants. Leal Holm has been established for many years as a holiday let, and prior to this as a bed and breakfast accommodation. It is within the Salcombe Conservation Area and falls within the Victorian suburbs and outer environs sub-area, and the description of this sub-area mainly refers to the older properties that are characteristic of Salcombe, the three-storey Victorian villas with front-facing gables, decorative barge boards and a strong vertical emphasis. Leal Holm is an earlier 20th century infill property forming part of the general 20th century expansion of the town. The buildings in this category display a variety of architectural styles and roof types, including hipped, gabled, and occasionally flat. There is no dominant style within this group of buildings. It is not a listed building or a non-designated heritage asset, neither has it been noted as being of any particular interest in either the Conservation Area Appraisal or the Salcombe Neighbourhood Development Plan. As such, the assessment was undertaken to consider the impact of the proposed works may have on the wider conservation area, rather than a more focused view that would be taken if it were a building of note in its own right. The requirements of the primary heritage legislation is that special attention shall be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area. The character of the existing building that contributes to the conservation area is seen in its symmetrical front elevation with triple windows at first floor and a pentice over the front door between the two square bays. The proposed development will retain this symmetry by extending the hips out to gables on either side without increasing the ridge height and thus ensuring the proportions of the building are maintained. The two dormers on the front will line up with the windows below, and a central roof light will sit above the small first floor window and all will sit within the roof plane. On the rear of the building, the central dormer will again align with the first floor with two smaller roof lights either side retaining the symmetry. However, there are no direct public views of the rear of the building and only oblique glimpses of the roof from higher up Allen Hayes Road. As noted, the character of this sub-area has been recognised primarily as the traditional Victorian properties, with a wider variety of 20th century buildings that include hipped, gabled and flat roofs. As such, the change from hips to gables on this roof will retain the overall character of the conservation area. Dormer windows are also a characteristic feature of the area, and so the inclusion of these will be in keeping. In conclusion, the alterations on the rear elevation will not be publicly visible to any extent that would affect the character or appearance of the conservation area, and the proposed alterations to the roof on the front elevation will retain the symmetry of the host building and will preserve the character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Metcalfe. Members, any questions? No. In which case, thank you very much, and we will move on to the parish council rep, Councillor Feist. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. The planning officer states that the height and footprint of the property is not changing, which is correct. However, the mass and visual impact of the property is increasing significantly, with the replacement of a hip roof with a gable end roof, and this will have an impact on the street scene and the conservation area. We feel that the major impact will be on the neighbouring property to the south, Eastern Grey, which will now be dominated by a large gable end wall very near to their property, although this hasn't been covered in the officer's report despite being included in the Town Council objection. The officer's report, paragraph 1.4, states that surrounding properties have pitched roofs and gables, and so the proposed design would be in keeping. However, this design bears no resemblance to neighbourhood dwellings, and this property is set much closer to the road and is set lower down towards the road. Paragraph 1.5 states that pitched roof dormers are common within Allen Hayes Road, and that the proposed dormers are considered to be proportionate in scale to the roof space. This is not the case, as proportionately they are much larger. Paragraph 1.6 states that the building would retain its original Edwardian character. How can it when the roof is being changed significantly? The officer refers to policy SALT B1 paragraph 3 of the neighbourhood plan, but as we've already heard, that deals with development outside the conservation area. The relevant paragraph is SALT B1 paragraph 2, which states within the Salcombe and Batson conservation areas, development should preserve and enhance the conservation area and make a positive contribution to the significance of the heritage assets and their setting, and have regard to the Salcombe Conservation Area Appraisal 2010. In the view of Town Council, this development does not preserve or enhance the conservation area, as it is removing the unique character of this Edwardian dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fyce. Members, any questions for Councillor Fyce? No. In which case, thank you very much. We will move on to the ward members. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. The heritage statement picks up that the site of this house used to be a quarry. This explains why the house is a later build than either of its Victorian original neighbours, Allen Hayes and Eastone Grey, although Eastone Grey has been pretty messed around with, so it doesn't look very Victorian, but I'll explain why it's Victorian in a minute. Or indeed many of the houses behind in Bonaventure Road, which are late Victorian. But those houses are outside the conservation area. This is actually the last row of houses in the Salcombe conservation area. On closer examination, it can be seen that Leholme has been judiciously inserted into the gap formed by the former quarry. Though there's not a lot of room either side, the houses are quite close together in this part of Allen Hayes Road. In this respect, the full hips on the roof are not only characteristic of such a perfect Edwardian villa, but help to reduce the massing of the roof and give a feeling of space between the houses, which are in fact, as I've already said, quite close together. This advantage would be completely lost if the proposal under discussion is approved, and the result would be oppressive. The quarry location and the date of the build would make it very likely that this house could have been built by the Murch family, the famous Salcombe building firm, but I've been able to get that confirmed. This alone would be a good reason for preserving its present integrity. As you can see there from the facade, although it's been messed around with a bit, especially around the back, the frontage onto the street is remarkably intact. It's lost its chimneys because there are chimney breasts on the internal plans, but that lovely veranda and the front door are still original, and really there is nothing else like it in Salcombe. I think there's something like it down on Victoria Quay, but not as good. And it is remarkable that it hasn't been picked up either by the neighbourhood plan or by the conservation area appraisal. So extending the ridge across the plot and adding dormers and roof lights, the latter are especially counselled against by the neighbourhood plan, would give an unbalanced facade, and the massing and bulk would be detrimental to the conservation area and over-dominate the street scene. The proposal would destroy the reasonably historically intact facade of this really perfect Edwardian house, which at present sits very comfortably with its Victorian neighbours in the street scene. Now, I think we need to talk about these gables a little bit. I'm afraid the officer gets it completely wrong when she says that having gables on the end would be all right, because you can see from the photograph in front of you that the Victorian houses all have front-facing gables. So to put the gables either side of the building, quite apart from the massing and the disturbance on the street scene, would be entirely uncharacteristic of this part of Salcombe. But as it is, that hip roof sits quite comfortably with its surroundings. Members, if you approve this application, a true gem in the conservation area, seemingly unrecognised and unappreciated by the conservation area appraisal, the neighbourhood plan, though I'm not knocking them in particular, and in particular the committee report, which should have picked this up, will be lost forever. Please, members, reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearce. And any questions, members, for Councillor Pearce? No, in which case we will move to the other ward member, Councillor Long, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I wouldn't say Councillor Pearce has stolen everything I wanted to say, but she's put it, I think, very succinctly and very clearly. It is important that we recognise that this is an Edwardian property, and as such, it does make an important contribution to the conservation area, and more importantly, the variety of architecture in that conservation area. When you look at this and look at the proposed changes, it doesn't preserve and enhance the conservation area. And as we've heard, this is, in reality, it may not be the only Edwardian villa, but it's certainly one that is easily recognised as such because of the simple roof design. It is, as has been said, clearly part of the town's historic evolution and development, and as such should be recognised for that. And it is, as Councillor Pearce has said, a shame that it wasn't picked up in the conservation area appraisal and within the neighbourhood plan, but that doesn't mean to say that such works should be allowed. So I think that the committee should look seriously at this proposal with the potential damage that it will cause to the conservation area and the potential loss of what is, as you can see from the photograph in front of you, a property that sits very, very comfortably. And I think Councillor Pearce has picked up quite clearly about the massing of the gables, in that what is being presented is clearly not what is represented in the conservation area. So it will be interesting to see the comments from my fellow committee members who have obviously had the opportunity to look at these documents the same. And I think it's interesting the comments that were made by, or non-comments made by, the heritage officers, that you can look at this either direction. And I would hope that members will look closely at this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Any questions? I have a question. Let me just see who that's from. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can I just ask, I mean, obviously this, as it's been mentioned, it has had a chimney or chimneys. Would they have been like a glebe house? Would they have been up on each of the gables, or would it have been a central chimney? Does Councillor Long know?
I can look and check on that. I can't recall the position of the chimneys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Is this a primary residence or is it still holiday let? And if it's holiday let, why do they want such much more room?
Let me stop you there, Councillor Taylor. I'm afraid that that's not a material planning consideration, and shouldn't come into your thinking about who owns it and what's it for. It's just merely the planning application as is, because whatever happens, it could change tomorrow. Anyway, so we'll move on from that. Unless did you have any more questions? No. Okay. Right. Right, members. I will move into debate now. Are there who would like to speak on this application? Do I have any takers? Just wait for those to type. Or
Chair, Councillor Hodgson's hand is up, but I don't know if that's a residue.
Okay, well, I'll go to Councillor Foss. I'm not sure if that's a historical hand there, Councillor Hodgson, but Councillor Foss.
It's not up.
No, okay. All right, thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Foss.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I did have a little smile to myself. It's not every day of the week that the two ward members are both on the same side, so that's a plus point. Yeah, I can see exactly what they're saying about the way it sits in there, and if it could be proved that it was built by the Mertz family, it would be a real shame to lose this, and I can see where they're both coming from, and I think probably the conservation people were right. It's one of those balanced views. Each member on the committee is probably going to have their own view, and probably some of them will be different, but at the moment I'm leaning towards the ward members' point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. I'm not clear at all on the planning grounds on which this would be refused. It seems to me that the arguments for permitted development and for its proposed development as within the height restrictions and the size of the building, that none of this really argues against it, against the plan change going ahead. If there are reasons planning reasons to stop this, I don't yet understand them.
Okay, Councillor Abbott, if I could say just that I mean, it's a conservation area, and our position on conservation areas is that the buildings are meant to well, as it says, conserve the conservation area. I'm not quite sure whether it has enhance as well, but they're certainly meant to conserve it. So in that sense, it's a subjective view as to whether you think that the changes to it do conserve the conservation area or whether they're detrimental to it. So I think those are the planning reasons for those that are opposed to it would call into question. So there are you know, I think as has been discussed in the debate already, it's a subjective decision, and it's a close decision on whether you think that the new application fits in or doesn't, is better or worse than what we have there already. Councillor Long, did you want to say something? No, or no, yeah, Councillor Long, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it is important, you know, the sort of main issue really is on the character and appearance of the Salcombe Conservation Area. And as I've said, you know, are we wanting that conservation area to become a sort of a pastiche of Victorian style properties? That is not what it's like. The Salcombe Conservation Area, any of the assets in there, the Salcombe Conservation Area itself is a designated heritage asset as such, where, as it says, basically special attention must be paid to the desirability of preserving or enhancing the character or appearance of the conservation area. And as has been said, you know, you could look at this as being subjective, but it is an Edwardian property, and as such does make a contribution to it. And the idea of actually just changing something like this because it fits in vaguely with others is, I do believe, going against the, you know, the character of that conservation area. We should be having variety in there. If we're looking and saying that all the buildings in the conservation area can be changed to something akin to a Victorian property, then we'll lose that character. It is that style. And also, I think it is important, as has been picked up before, about the gable. That creation of a gable on those ends would be very visible. It would change the style, because when you look down that street, as has already been said, the gables are forward facing. And I think it does come back, you know, it's the scale, the massing, the design, but it is that character of the conservation area. And, you know, it wouldn't fit, I don't believe, within a number of the development plan policies. It certainly goes against the Salcombe, one of the Salcombe neighbourhood plan policies. And I think it is important that this committee really does look at maintaining that diversity in the conservation area by keeping properties like this as close to what they were in the past as possible. Obviously, properties will be improved to bring them up to the standard of today's. It's lost its chimneys, unfortunately, which, just to confirm, were actually on the outside of the property running up. So you would have seen chimneys either side of that property. It's a shame we've lost those, but it still doesn't detract from it being an Edwardian property and recognisable as such. And I think the problem is that if we allow this change to go forward, we are losing that and starting a trend within the conservation area. And I do believe, and going back to Councillor Abbott, it is important that we preserve and enhance. And I don't think that changing one property, a particular period property, which was put in there, filled the gap, as has already been pointed out by Councillor Pearce, you know, it was built in that period. It is part of an important evolution. And as such, we should show that steady evolution of the town. And that's why it's in the conservation area. So, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move for refusal for this application, contrary to the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Kemp.
Hi there. I'd just like to know when is enough in Salcombe, actually. I mean, is that hipped roof is it's a lovely roof, and you know, I don't think it should be a big old square block. And Salcombe is already totally overdeveloped. It looks like a glorified Legoland from a distance. So, you know, let's try and preserve what there is left. Is all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that increasing the use of existing stock is far kinder on our climate and our ecology than going into greenfield sites. On the other hand, I really respect the fact that we've got historic here, and I think that's really important too. So I just thought I'd just throw that into the thoughts for the afternoon.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Yeah, no, that's all good points. Are there any other members that wish to comment on or have their say on this application? Someone's just dropped their hand. I can't see.
Yes, it's me.
Councillor Rowe. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Rowe. Yeah, go ahead.
I should have looked through the letters, I guess, but this is in the AONB. And were there any comments from the AONB officer, please?
Would you like me to answer that? Yeah, no, the AONB wouldn't comment on a householder application.
No, they didn't comment. Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. If I say my view, I mean, my views are, I mean, when I look at that, I think that is a very elegant looking house that is sort of epitomises what a conservation area should be. I think to square off the roof, you would lose those lines. And as such, I can't see how it's preserving or enhancing the conservation area. So I'll be happy to second Councillor Long's recommendation for refusal on this application.
That's right, Chair.
Okay. Does anyone else have to say anything else before? I haven't had any other proposals.
Got my hand up.
Councillor Holway, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. As ever, I beg to differ. I don't think it will make an awful lot of difference. The house is already higher than the street. The house next door, Eastern Grey, has got permission to go up another storey. But if it's going up another 8 feet on the ridge, one presumes that it's to make room for another storey. The house to the right, looking at it, looks to be already higher as well. So I don't have a problem with it, and I'd be happy to move approval in line with officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman, I'm going to concur with you. I was going to second it, but you beat me to it, so that's all I need to say.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. Do I have anyone else? I've got some hands up, but I think those are all historical. Someone say if you want to speak before we've got a proposal for refusal, and that's been seconded as against officer recommendation. And yeah, no, absolutely, we will. Myself as seconder and Councillor Long's proposer, we will come up with reasons as to why that would be for refusal. And I see that Councillor Abbott is seconding the recommendation for approval as per the officer recommendation. But we had the refusal first, so we'll take that vote first. Councillor Long, did you want to give some reasons?
If I may, Chair, and obviously take guidance on this, I think some of the notes I made, the proposed development, by reason of its scale, massing and design, is considered harmful to the character and appearance of the conservation area. But also, we could add in there, but also fails to conserve and enhance the landscaping scenic beauty of this part of the South Devon AONB. I think it policies SPT 11, strategic approach to historic environment. I think Dev 20, place shaping and quality of the built environment. I think Dev 21, development of affecting the historic environment. And I believe Salcombe Neighbourhood Plan Policy, Salcombe B1, would apply. And I believe there are elements that I haven't looked through thoroughly on them of the NPPF could be applied for reasons for refusal. And I think that it is primarily the detrimental impact that it will have on the character and appearance of the conservation area, backed by those policy elements.
Thank you. Mr. Weimer, are you happy with those reasons?
Obviously, in the context that I agree with the officer's recommendation, but given Councillor Long's comments, I think the members' main issue is that the design and the design and the alteration to the shape and mass of the roof fails to preserve and enhance the Salcombe conservation area, and I think coupled with the loss of a particular property of that particular age, the Edwardian property. I understand where that's coming from, and I think it's Dev 21 that deals with the historic assets, designated heritage assets. I think that's the correct policy if that's the view members are taking. Personally, I think it would be a real struggle to say this would have an adverse impact on the wider AONB. I think it's more to do with the built environment and the conservation area rather than the wider landscape. But obviously, again, that's an issue for members to take. But I say personally, I would struggle to see how we could defend the impact on the AONB. But I think there's an argument to be had around the impact on the conservation area. And can I suggest that the vote is that the precise wording of the reason for refusal is delegated to myself in conjunction with, in this case, yourself, Chairman, and Councillor Long being the proposer and seconder for the motion. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Councillor Long, are you happy to take out the AONB element of the reasons?
I'm happy to take out the AONB element and happy to sort of include the aspects that Mr. Weimer has said.
Yeah, which I think you covered in just in different way round. I mean, the design, the bulk, detrimental to both the conservation area and also loss of a historical building. Well, the appearance of a historical building within the conservation. So that was Dev 21, I think. Right. OK, in which case, members, we will go to the vote on this. Miss Young, over to you.
Thank you, Chair.
This is for refusal.
Yep. So if you could confirm that you've heard all of the debate and how you are voting on refusal of this application. Councillor Abbott.
I've heard the debate and I vote against refusal.
Yep. Councillor Brazil.
I've heard the debate and I vote for refusal.
Councillor Foss.
I've heard the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
I've heard the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Hallway.
I've heard all the debate and I vote against refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for refusal.
Councillor Pannell.
I've heard the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
I've heard the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for refusal.
Thank you. So, Chair, that is 9 for refusal and 2 against.
Thank you, members. That application is refused. Right, we will move directly on to, let me find my bits of paper. Agenda item 6D, which is application, excuse me, 6D, application 2151/20/full. Mr. Gibbons, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. If you can just give me a couple of seconds just to load up the presentation, because I need to close it down from the previous application, and I will begin.
That's fine. I think there have been some issues with downloading presentations, so it may take a bit of time, I've heard.
It's it looks like it's getting there, so hopefully it shouldn't take
Good.
too long.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. Can I just check that members are able to see that presentation screen?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, thank you very much. Well, yeah, good afternoon, members, and this is the application at Englethorpe Woods, Harberton Ford, near Totnes. It's a retrospective application for the retention of some forestry tracts within an existing woodland, which is located to the west of Harberton Ford, and you can see this on the map here. This is the site location plan of Inglebourne Quarry. The quarry is an historic quarry that was originally used for the mining of slate, probably back in the period of the sort of 1700s, although there's no planning history going back that far. We've got an application for tracks, which there has been some local
We've
concern.
got a list of your emails, Oliver.
Sorry.
There's a
list
list
of my emails, have you? Oh,
Yeah.
sorry. Might be. Are you seeing my screen now? Is that coming up? Sorry.
We're seeing your email. We're seeing your email screen.
Oh, okay. I don't think that is my email screen, actually. I don't know whose screen that is. Sorry, let me
It looks like it's Councillor Pannell's.
It's the
you need to request permission back, Oliver, or Guy, if you want to tick in the red cross up at the top, you'll stop sharing.
Yeah, sorry, if I just bring back that presentation back again and see if that comes back.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, that's works.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, brilliant. Hopefully, right. Yeah. So, as I was saying, the application is for the retention of the tracks to the woodland. So, if there's aerial photography of the site, which corresponds to the map there. So you can see it's an established area of woodland. here's the application drawings. The areas of red here is the application site where they are putting in or looking to retain existing track. The tracks have been required to undertake forestry works, which have been licensed by the Forestry Commission. The Forestry Commission have authorised the felling of the woodland and have conditioned that it is replanted, and these tracks have been put in to facilitate that. So there's a section of track there. I don't know if you can see my cursor. I know there's some problems with cursors earlier, but around the top there, from the northern part down to the road, which will correspond to some photographs in a moment, and then a separate section to the east of the site, again to provide access for the felling of the trees. So these are the photos of the site.
I'll be really rude and interrupt. Apologies. Yeah. Can you go into slide view so you make the presentation slide bigger? That'd be great.
Yeah. Is it? Yeah, sure, no problem. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So just to repeat that part, the sections of track are where my cursor is there, down to the road, which will correspond to the photos in a moment, and then to the east, you've got a small section of track there. So moving on to the next slide, which is the photograph. The photo on the left-hand side of the screen there is from the top of the section. Obviously, with the plan form, you don't appreciate the topography, the areas above the road level. So that's looking back towards the sort of the hill, and then the second photo on the right-hand side is looking from the lower part of the track. So it's providing access track up. It's a track that's been constructed from compressed aggregate on the site. The next photograph again is looking up from the road up to the where the track comes out, and then the photo on the left is sort of trying to show the changes in levels which have occurred to facilitate the track. So there has been considerable local interest in this application because the application has come in retrospectively, so there's obviously some concerns about works that have been done retrospectively. The applicant did in fact apply for a Part 6 application of the General Permitted Development Order, which is works to forestry land, which would have been permitted development if the application hadn't been started, because it's application for prior approval. Once works are commenced, then you can no longer apply for prior approval. So there are some permitted development rights which the applicant would have been able to benefit from if that was the case. There has also been some concerns about the impact on the landscape, and a large impact of this is to do with the felling of the trees. The felling of the trees didn't require planning permission. It was under a Forestry Commission licence, which has been authorised by the Forestry Commission and approved for the felling of the trees. It's understood that there was a considerable amount of ash dieback within the forestry land, and that was required to be felled. There was also issues with trees overhanging the road, which again was a safety issue, and the Forestry Commission authorised those to be felled. The benefit of a clearance of the site is that it allows for conditions and management plans to be put into place, and that would include the restocking of the forestry land, which would then allow for the regeneration of the woodland and the trees to sort of screen the development and make it assimilate into the landscape more. So really the nature of this application is just for the access tracks. The felling of the trees is not something that requires planning permission. So the application for the access tracks is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out within the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Any questions, members? Councillor Rowe, I've got a hand up there, but I think that might be from the last debate. Councillor Kemp.
I have to admit, I haven't read in detail this report, and I don't really quite understand the point of ripping out the woodland just to plant it again. So can someone explain that?
Well, can I just add that that's not the application really. That's part of a Forestry Commission licence that's been given to take the wood down. So it's really just the track we're looking at. I mean, that's how managed forest woodland works. They grow and then you chop them down and replant.
Right.
I understand there was some issues with dieback as well. So a lot of the ash trees within that area were causing a danger to the highway. So I understand that was part of the licence as well, to fell those trees which were causing dangers to the highway.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer that, Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Was there an original path up to the forest that is going to be felled, or is this completely new? And if it wasn't there, how the hell are they going to get at the trees to cut them down anyway?
Yeah, well, there's sections of track within their site. You can see from this this map here, or this site plan that's on your screen, the sections of grey are existing tracks. So there were sections of existing tracks, but because the site hasn't been managed for a long time, there wasn't sufficient access down to the highway. So these tracks were put in to facilitate that. And then just going back to the aerial photography, although there is an area of tree canopy shown on there, you can see the sort of tracks that go through here, and that that's just accepted and existing tracks through the area of forest.
So we're looking at a part application really, then, not a full one.
Well, this application, the part of the tracks which that plan now on your screen should be showing you the red areas where the actual parts of the track are. That they're the new parts of the track, but it is a full application.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to raise some issues and some questions really that have been raised by the parish council. I am the county councillor for Harberton, so I was there when they were discussing this, and they were very concerned. I mean, I hear what's been said about the wildlife issue, because the trees people are allowed to fell their woodlands. But it does seem that would have been, it would have been nice to have. But one thing they have raised is that there hasn't been any kind of geology report to really look at the potential for landslips, because obviously if they're ripping out the trees and they're putting in all these tracks, then they're doing quite a lot, and you can start to incur, especially with the changeable weather that we have at the moment, you can start to incur the potential for landslips, which could be quite detrimental to the area in general, and also that would have an impact on the wildlife, which would be a direct result of these tracks being developed. So can I ask the officer why that information hasn't been required?
Well, I don't think it was particularly necessary for us in terms of the application in this regard, because of the nature of the works that have been undertaken. I've been out on site and understood the context of the site, the changes in levels and the position in relation to the public highway, and it wasn't considered necessary for further work to be submitted to support the application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foss.
Yeah, Chairman. I understand this. Most of this is an old quarry, as I understand from the past, and these tracks are for the management of what is basically a long-term crop. I mean, to replant it all with trees, and the sooner it is, the better. If they had to take out the ash with ash dieback, well, we fully understand why that needed to happen. I understand some of the concerns, but as far as I can see, the sooner we get on with this and they get back in there and they're allowed to move in around there and get the trees replanted, the better it will be for the whole site, for the trees, the wildlife, and everything else.
Okay, thank you. Right, let's. Any more questions? Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. There was the issue around previously, there was an assumption that was 20 car parking spaces being provided, and I think that has been addressed. I can't see on the plans, but obviously I am assuming that what that area was to be either a compound for log storage, timber storage, or something like that, but I can't actually see the position that on the plan. And is it clear that that is it's not a parking area, or is it just part of the extension of the actual tracks that have been installed there?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Long. Yes, the applicants have put this application in themselves, and there has been some confusion around the issue of car parking. It has been clarified with the applicants, and it is a compound area. If you can see on that photograph on the right hand side, there's a shipping container there, and that's used for the storage of plant and machinery. I clarified the point of the car parking, and they're not providing car parking. It was their sort of inexperience of putting plan applications in, and they thought that that would be a good illustration of what it would be used for, and that's sort of at face value they thought about 20 cars could park there, but it's not to do with car parking. There wouldn't be planning permission granted for car parking. It's simply the area around the compound area on the right hand side. So the application that we're granting here is just for the access for the tracks. There wouldn't be granted planning as on the red line boundary plan. This plan here is just for those tracks. That's what this application would be granting permission for.
Thank you, Oliver. Would there be sort of planning issues if there were a number of containers and other material installed on that site? Because obviously it seems to be very close to the roadway there, very visible.
Yes, of course. Yeah, we would need to consider applications if they came in for further development. As you say, it's a rural area at the moment, and the development there, if there was further development there, that could cause concern to the impact on the character and appearance of the area, which we probably want to try and protect, really.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Sorry if I come across as a bit of a cynic, but it is just a question as to whether this is a precursor for development. And so what happens if they decide, well, actually, we've changed our minds, we're not going to plant any trees, we're going to build lots of houses?
That's not what that's not what this is about. This is about what it's the retrospective for all those tracks, and we can't try and guess what they might do. I should also add that I think within the licence of the felling that they've had to replant. So if they didn't replant, they'd be in breach of that licence from the Forestry Commission.
Okay, and who enforces that then? The Forestry Commission itself? I
presume, yeah. But I mean that's like a precursor for houses. That's if they want to, they'll have to put an application for it, and we would judge it on its merits as and when it came in. But we can't judge this saying it might be because they're about to. We just can't look at it like that, I'm afraid. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the question? I'm not sure where the entrance is to this quarry. That's obviously the road going up from Harberton Ford towards Monkey Oak Farmhouse, but where along the line is the entrance to the wooded area along that road, please?
Yes, if we go back to this site plan, that you can see the extent of the application site there. The entrance, you can see it there on the hard stand, that area there. That's where the entrance and that pull-in is. So that's the access into the site.
Is it near Roaster Bridge then? Roaster Bridge Farm. The bridge goes off to the left.
Yeah. If you go round to Monkey, I think it's called Monkey. Is it called Monkey Barn Farm?
Farmhouse.
Monkey Oak Farmhouse. If you follow that road around as it curves, the access into that barn or that dwelling is just up the top down on the right hand side.
Oh, so it's near the farmhouse.
Yeah, yes. I mean, I don't.
Yes, yeah. Well, I know that area pretty well. I haven't been there for a long time, but the entrance to that wooded land was always by that Monkey Oak farmhouse. It was a farm, farmed in the up until the late 70s, I guess. I knew it quite well then. And the entrance to that area was always by Monkey Oak farmhouse. You went up to the right where the farmhouse is, and there was a track up by the side of it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Councillor Taylor. Did
No,
no, sorry. I see you taking that. I've got Councillor Foss with your hand up. Is that historical?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So I think we've finished with questions there. We'll move on to the speakers now, if we may. And the first speaker I have is Mr. Marrow, speaking in favour of the application. Mr. Marrow, if you're with us, you've got 3 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you and see you. Yeah.
Right. I am a professional chartered forester. I wasn't involved with the felling or the implementation of the track works at Engelbourne. I've been engaged since then by the applicant to advise on the future management of his woodland. Managing woodlands is generally recognised as a good thing. It helps bring multiple benefits, but despite that, 45% of England's woods are not managed. There are 3 main reasons for this. The first is that owners are often too busy, not interested, or not motivated. That isn't the case here. The applicant is committed and enthusiastic. The second reason is that managing woods generally costs money, and for many years the sums simply haven't stacked up. But increasingly they do now, because demand for timber is high and markets are strong. The final reason is that access is often difficult because woods are usually on land which is steep, wet, landlocked, sometimes all 3. Without access, you can't get onto site to do anything. For all the right reasons in this case, the applicant sought to make some very logical and necessary improvements to the tracks at Engelbourne. He recognises and regrets that in his enthusiasm he overlooked the need for prior approval. Approving this application now will correct that omission. It will legitimise the owner's good intentions and it will help facilitate future management. The biggest single improvement you can generally make to neglected woodlands is to have fewer trees in them and a bit more open space. It's a bit like letting them breathe freely. Having trees and shrubs of all ages present makes a big difference. Young, middle-aged, mature and over-mature. And so does having a wider range of species. My work seeks to achieve this diversity, and there's great potential at Engelbourne. The raw appearance of the felled areas has already started healing. Next, they will be replanted with a mix of native trees and shrubs, and coppice regrowth will be incorporated. This will quickly help restore the wooded landscape and will add young trees to the middle-aged and older ones already present. Subject to your approval, the tracks will be retained. They will colonise with vegetation slowly, but the replanting will help screen sections which are visible from the public road. They'll become a positive part of the permanent structure of the woodland. They'll add diversity by catering for a wider range of species than those which depend on enclosed woodland habitat alone. And their linear nature will also help connect up separate areas by acting as miniature wildlife corridors. And of course, they will allow access for future management, whether that's tending and maintaining the young trees or selectively thinning out areas of retained trees. 3 minutes is too short a time to go into all the benefits of positive woodland management. For 35 years, practical experience has taught me that without good access to woodlands, you can't even begin to deliver those benefits. I hope I've said enough just to convince you of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marrow. Members, any questions for Mr. Marrow? Let me have a look here. No, I can't see any. Thank you very much, sir. I'll now move on to the ward member, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Chair. I did send some slides in to be used. I wonder if they could be put up. Okay. I just want to start by saying that the part 6 that was referred to by Mr. Gibbons would not have necessarily been a done deal, because there are some serious biodiversity and environmental issues here that don't seem to have been taken into account. And so had these been taken into account, and the for instance, the wildlife triggers and the rest of it been done, I doubt whether the part 6 would have been approved. So if we go back to the slides, one of the key things is that there are so many errors in this application, and this is what's caused a lot of concern both from the parish council and from many residents. There's been about 16 objections, not including the parish council itself, and I have had endless telephone calls and had my ear bent about what's happened at these woods. So, and one of the problems are all these errors. So I've done my own checking, and the fact that it's stated that it's 0.1 hectares, this is not correct. I've measured it with Google Earth, and if anybody wants to check the accuracy of these things, there's a paper where you can demonstrate that you can get pretty accurate measurements, and by my reckoning, it's not 0.1 hectares, it's a lot more than that. So there's that. The description of the proposal to just remove diseased trees, clearly we've gone beyond that. What we've actually done is clear fell 3.5 hectares, if not more, of mixed deciduous woodland. Now, this is not commercial woodland. This was mixed, so it is not being managed for profit. It's mixed deciduous woodland that was a reservoir of biodiversity, and that has now just gone. There are various other details. We can go to the next slide because we've already covered car parking. So I want to be as quick as possible for everybody. I'm sure you're all exhausted. Can we go to the next slide? In the application form, there's a section 12, biodiversity and geological conservation. Now, for everything in there, the answer no has been given. And this is just simply incorrect. The woods are 5 kilometres from the Highmark Barnes SSSI, which is an important greater horseshoe bat roost. The site actually does lie within the impact risk zone for this SSSI. Only just, but it does. And it is just outside the designated sustenance zone, which is basically where the horseshoe bat forages, and it's right bang in the middle of the landscape link zone, which is basically flight paths, etc. So there's that aspect that seems to have been ignored, and the woods, as were, did have significant hazel cover, and it's an area where there are dormice. Now, these are all important for the creation of the track, facilitated the clear felling of the woods, but also in the creation of the track, it's actually done some considerable damage, I think. So can we go to the next slide? Could we go to the next slide? Thanks. Right, there's a thing about in the application form about designating sites of important habitats. Well, the site is actually listed as a priority habitat in the inventory of deciduous woodlands by Natural England. It's about 600 metres from an ancient semi-natural woodland, and it is immediately adjacent to the biodiversity project, where there are reed beds and it's etc. Associated with Palmer's Dam. I mean, that's literally across the road from this site. Next slide. And the quarry itself is a RIG, so-called, a regionally important geological geomorphical site. It's listed as such. And that again, so answering no to this, all these questions in the application form was simply wrong. Go to the next slide, please.
So we come to the wildlife triggers form, and because the first fact is it's more than 0.1 hectares, so the answer to the first question is wrong. Did it involve works to a quarry? Well, clearly it does. It's actually taken out one side of this important site, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. And also, whilst the works were being undertaken, and this is the creation of the track, a lot of this was done because it was done sort of December time. I can't remember exactly when it was done, but there were lots of big lights being used because of day length, and so the answer to this question was wrong as well. Next slide. Oh, yeah. I'm not going to bore you by going through all of these. It's just that every single item in here has been answered no, when clearly the answer should have been yes. If we now go to the overlay, the next slide. Could we make that slightly bigger? It's a bit. Yeah, that's great. The red line is the track down to and to the bottom of the picture, which is where the quarry is, and the black line is where the proposed track, as in the application. And I've actually overlaid that onto what is actually the reality now. And you can see that the track goes way beyond this thing, and the red part has been widened. So all of this is part of the site to all effective purposes. The entrance to the site, which is up at the top of the picture where the Monkey Oak Barn is, and down at the bottom is the quarry, which is now the alternative entrance, which has been created. In order to manage this site, I would argue you don't need both. But anyway, could we move on to the next slide? This is what this, as it happens, the satellite flew over here in 2020, and so we've got an aerial view of the site as it is now, and you can see the tracks clearly, and that's what I used to measure the width. Having zoomed in quite a lot, but and if you go to the next slide, you'll see what it was 4 years previously or 3 years previously. It's difficult to imagine, given those two pictures, how that track could have been created without knocking down quite a few trees. We go to the next slide. This is the quarry, the protected quarry, which has had this track gouged out of it at one side, the width of which is, as you can see from the banks. I mean, it's not just the tram tracks, where it's the banks either side. You can see the amount of damage that's been done, and this is the quarry. Now, and the next slide, please. So my question is there may well have been a danger to the public, but no evidence has been provided to support that. So the reason for this track, the reason for the clear felling, which I would have thought was important in considering whether to grant permission or not, no evidence has ever been provided that this was the case. And in my view, because I used to walk up that road an awful lot, there were the occasion there was a lot of overhang, but those trees that were a possible danger to the public could have been dealt with from the roadside, because the road had to be closed anyway on several occasions during the course of this operation. So there would have been an easier way to manage it. And my understanding as well, and I am straying into areas that I have no expertise in, so but from the reading that I've done, clear felling is something that should be used as a last resort, and because you want to preserve trees as best you can and pollard them and do what is necessary, but clear felling does not necessarily is not necessarily the right approach. And I would have liked to have seen some evidence to support the clear felling requirement, which has never been presented. So next slide. I'm almost done. There's a lot of people have got quite upset about this, and for good reason, because they've actually the habitat loss that they've observed has actually, they've seen the consequences. This is a retrospective application, so although you're meant to be considering this without regard to what's actually happened, what the habitat loss that you might have expected from clear felling at this amount of woodland and facilitated by this track has produced an awful lot of comment, and people have observed changes in wildlife and etc. locally. So last slide, I think it's the last slide. Next slide. Yeah, I think this application should be refused on planning grounds. Now, I can fully understand why the committee might say that where's that going to take us, and I have some sympathy with that view, to be honest. The horse has bolted here, but I do sort of feel that we should be making a statement that this sort of thing should be done in the proper way, and answering questions like this, the way that the way the application has been presented, I think is quite wrong, and there needs to be some form of protest at the way it's been done. But refusal, I can see there's a problem with that. I don't know. I have put some recommendations there that that I would like to see happen, but I leave it up to the committee to decide. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKay. Members, any questions? No, in which case we will move to the debate. First of all, can I just remind members that the felling of the trees is not what we're discussing here. It's the track, and I understand the the local concern with the felling of the trees, but actually that's nothing to do with us. That's a Forestry Commission licence that's allowed that. So many of the questions that have been raised are nothing to do with this planning committee at all. It's all to do with the track and whether we think the track is acceptable or not. Anyway, members, over to you. Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor McKay, for a very comprehensive sort of presentation there and raising some points. And I think as a planning committee, we really do need, I'm straying into areas that I have no understanding when you're talking about rigs and the quarry and geological, importance, and some of the other areas, local impact areas, which obviously this potentially does. So I think as a planning committee, we need to look at that. I agree with the chairman that the aspects around the Forestry Commission felling licence, that's a Forestry Commission matter, and they have, dare I say it, perhaps better enforcement powers and abilities than this council does on enforcement. So I would have expected that to have covered all matters, and they'll take legal action if it was breached. But I think as a planning committee, we really do need to look at these other sort of aspects. And I do question whether, if we couldn't refuse it because the damage, so to speak, has already been done, that mitigation measures need to go in place to stop any further damage. And I do question the extent of the tracks and widths that have been put in place, although I recognise that, tractors, trailers to haul out timber may require something that wide for safety points. But I think a restriction on any further works without another planning application,
and I think a potential challenge on the completion of the documents that were submitted, because obviously Councillor Mackay has highlighted that they were completed sort of incorrectly, although the officer may, obviously believe that it was correct. So I do have a problem with this because it's retrospective, the damage is done. I think it had come before us as a planning application. Without those works, we may have been able to challenge it more completely. So I'm not too sure that a refusal is possible, although I'm erring on that sort of side. I just think it's a shame that we're in this position. And I think there are questions that have got to be raised about it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Councillor Rowe.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, this is a retrospect application, but it's not a historical site, and part of it was a quarry. There's always been wooded area there going up the road from Harberton Ford towards Monkey Oak Farm. I've known it for, well, all my life, for years and years, and it's always been a wooded area, but it's got into a bit of a muddle, really, and the applicant has carried on with doing this track, which looks pretty horrendous. They've taken out a lot of the area there, laid the track, etc., which is what we have to deal with, and I feel that it's gone too far. And I don't know if we can restrict them from doing any more work to it to make it so it's not so obvious and to sort it out. But as far as the trees are concerned, there was no objection from the tree specialist or the landscape officer. They had a felling licence, they hold a felling licence. The ash dieback trees have been cleared and replacement planting will take place. The woods have to be managed. People are more astute to managing woodland now. Years ago, it was just a bit of woodland and nobody bothered too much about it. But now owners of woodland manage it in a proper manner because there's a lot of money to be made out of wood and trees. And we've seen absolutely, well, loads and loads of trees destroyed, cut down all our hedges. You drive up the A38, the M4, the M5, and there've been trees cut down absolutely everywhere. But it's the track that we're concerned with, and I fear that there's not an awful lot we can do about it. So reluctantly, I will move approval.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I thank you, Councillor Mackay, for a very sort of comprehensive report for us to consider and giving us very much a different picture to what had been hitherto presented. I think this whole thing about the wildlife trigger table that you've raised, and also the fact that its proximity to other sites, that's really important. I mean, these wildlife areas, they do actually sort of like it's mutually supportive. And I think what shocked me was in the middle of it, you showed a slide showing the picture of the quarry and the roads that were going around there. And in the middle of that was a shipping container, which was almost lost. And those shipping containers are what? They 8 foot wide by 8 foot high and 20 foot long. And it was just like small compared to all the track that was around. So there's obviously a huge amount of clearance going on, which is presumably for much bigger vehicles. And I just think that that's, you know, we're seeing unnecessary, excessive destruction going on, and quarries are well known for being important recolonisation sites. Ex-quarries are where a lot of birds go and feel safe, and they are often sort of found to be really important for bats, etc. as well. But I just think it's something that we can limit it by what we actually say today on the track, because the track obviously is needed for them to carry on at this pace and in this way. And those aerial photographs you showed, I thought were really shocking. And I just think we shouldn't be destroying woodlands in this way. And while I accept this is an application for track, we do have the power to actually limit it. And the parish council have raised these issues. They're very concerned. And I think we should actually be saying that we want surveys done so we can understand what the impacts are going to be of this track being widened, because a track is there for a purpose. The track itself will cause a problem, but the actual use of the track will potentially cause further problems. And therefore, I actually push, I propose refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Okay, so I've got Councillor Taylor has seconded Councillor Rowe's recommendation for approval as per the officer recommendation. Are there any other members who want to speak before we go to the vote on approval? Councillor Holway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've heard from the planning officer that it was a bit of a technicality, and had they put an application in for permitted development, they would likely have got approval. So, you know, before doing anything. So I think we need to bear that in mind. I mean, Mr. Wyman may wish to comment on that in support of the planning officer. I think because we're where we are and because of what we've heard, there is a plan to replant both with trees and shrubs. We have to respect, I think, the expertise of the Forestry Commission, our own tree specialist and landscape officer. And so I really think that the only way is forward. And I think that now this track is there, if you tried to reinstate the track or play about with it, you'd only make the whole site worse. So I think we have to, if you like, to trust the applicant, by all means put some conditions in to enforce what they've said they're going to do. But I think it can only get better from now on in if it's replanted with trees and shrubs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holway. Right, any other, before we go to the vote for approval as per the officer recommendation?
Yeah, I got my hand up, Chairman.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Foss.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter because Councillor Holway's just about taking the words out of my mouth, so I shan't say any more than that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foss. Right, in which case we shall move to the vote, which is for approval as per the officer recommendation. Ms Young, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And as usual, please can you just confirm you've heard all of the debate? So for approval, Councillor Abbott.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
I have heard all of the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Foss.
I've heard all of the debate and I vote for approval.
Councillor Hodgson.
Sorry, I've heard all of the debate and I vote against approval.
Thank you. Councillor Holway.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
I've heard all the debate and I vote against approval.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
I've heard all the debate and I vote against approval.
Thank you. Councillor Panel.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Pringle.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I've heard all the debate and I vote for approval.
Thank you. Therefore, Chair, that is 8 for approval and 3 against.
Thank you, members. That application is approved. I'll just take a straw poll now. We've got the appeals and major developments, how they're getting on. Do members want a quick break, or do you want to?
Yeah, 10 minutes for a coffee.
Yeah, quick break, please, Chairman.
Okay, let's quick break. So we'll meet again at 1:45, if that's okay. So 10-minute break. so we can see Richard.
Hmm?
We can see your picture, Richard. That's nice.
Yeah, I'd see you.
Okay, well, touche. Right.
Too tame, like.
All right. Right. Okay. Let's move on to agenda item 7, which are the appeals. Pat, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll quickly run through these and see how we get on. If members got any questions, by all means interrupt me as I go on. So the first one was at Bickley. Members, I suspect members will remember this one because my recollection, there was quite a lengthy debate on this. It was the very large dwelling in the countryside where it was accepted that it was exception to policy, right? But they're arguing that it was acceptable exception under paragraph 79 of the MPPF. The inspector agreed with your decision, which was refusal. And I think the key was that the inspector accepted that it was designed to a very good standard, but they struggled to see how it would be so remarkable or excellent to reach the very high bar of being outstanding design. And overall, it would erode the unspoilt green open qualities of the site, and that was why it was refused, or the appeal dismissed, should I say. Unfortunately, however, we had a partial award of costs against us in this case, on the basis that the inspector didn't consider that we had substantiated a reason for refusal on the impact of the of ecology. And I think the point to take away from this is, at any point, if either if the council, whether it's a delegated decision or a committee decision, makes a decision on a technical matter, we're always running the risk of being found acted unreasonably if we haven't got the evidence to back that up, and that's across the board on technical matters. So I'm certainly not saying that we shouldn't be taking anything into account, but we've still got to make sure we can back it up. The second one is.
Can I just ask on that, Pat, because we've we've all had an email lambasting us for mentioning the bats as part of our reasoning. Will you be able to let us know when those costs are agreed, what the size of those costs are, so we have some idea of what sort of money we're letting the council in for?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll happily come back. At the moment, we haven't, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't received their costs claim to date. And we will then look to see what generally happens. We don't, to be fair, we don't get costs awarded against us very often. We've had a couple recently, but we don't get them very often. And what will normally happen is they'll make a claim. We'll look at it. If we think it's reasonable, we'll agree it. If we think they're over-egging it a bit, we'll negotiate. So, for argument's sake, the last one we looked at, and I can't remember the site. There were 3 reasons for refusal. The inspector said that we acted unreasonably on one of those reasons for refusal, so they automatically said, right, this is what we paid. It was one of 3, therefore you'll pay 30%. But when you actually looked at it, it wasn't 30%. It was probably a sixth of the appeal, because the other 2 reasons were far more chunky and would have taken their consultants far more work to deal with it. So it's not necessarily a straightforward. It's 2 reasons for refusal, therefore you should pay 50% of the costs, because the vast majority of the argument would have been on the primary point and not the second, not this second point. But yes, I'll happily come back with that.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add that it was encouraging to see the inspector say that although the design panel had agreed that the building did meet the criteria, that we were entitled as a committee to take a different view, and he upheld that. I thought that was very encouraging.
I think overall, for it was a very encouraging decision. I think it really did clearly show how much of a in many ways, a subjective decision it was, given the views of the independent design review panel. I absolutely agree. So I think it was a good decision from that perspective. The second one, Silly Cottage in Dartmouth. I'll bring some plans up at the end. I'll go through this and I'll share a screen and bring some plans up. I don't know how I quite feel about this one. I absolutely think think the refusal was the right way forward. It's a roof terrace on the front of the property with views across the river, full width of the house. But the inspector said because there's a variety in the terrace and there's something else in the terrace not dissimilar, that it would conserve and enhance the AONB. If I just share my screen a second. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. You should be able to see it. I'm not persuaded that a roof terrace that goes the width of a cottage in the terrace and then comes out as a terrace in the roof. I'm not persuaded that you can genuinely say that actually preserves and enhances the AONB, but the inspector took the view that it did. So that's one to bear in mind if we get anything similar. What's the next one? Is the next one's Jawbones, isn't it? Again, the inspector took the view that the dwelling would detract from the setting of Dartmouth, would erode the landscape and scenic beauty of the AONB, and would seriously harm the character and appearance of the area. I'll come back to Hayes Barton if that's okay. Pillory Hill. This is one where we have had costs awarded against us, and again, when that comes through, I'll report the level of the costs to you. The inspector gave significant weight to the fallback of a 2018 planning permission, considered that it wouldn't harm the character and appearance of the area, that whilst it would be seen in the setting of the listed church, it wouldn't cause harm because it didn't harmfully intrude into that setting, that it wouldn't harm neighbouring amenity, and that 2 car parking spaces were acceptable. Now, interestingly, from the parish perspective, the parish's comment was that there was insufficient parking because the property was capable of having more than 3 bedrooms, and therefore it's contrary to the neighbourhood plan. The inspector addresses this quite clearly in the decision letter, and I think this is worthwhile just bringing to your attention. What they say is, amongst other things, neighbourhood plan policy N3P-5 requires 3-bedroom properties to have 2 off-road spaces and 4-bedroom properties to have 3 spaces. This policy also states that garages will not normally be counted as parking spaces. As the proposal is for 3-bedroom property, there'll be no conflict with these provisions. If one of the additional rooms, such as the proposed office, was subsequently used as an additional bedroom, discounting the garage space, this would be deficient in 1 off-street parking space. However, that cannot be a sound way to apply NP policy. To do so would require assumptions to be made in all future applications for new housing as to what rooms have the potential to be used as bedrooms, in addition to those specified as bedrooms on the submitted plans. This would introduce considerable scope for errors and inconsistencies within the decision-making process, and neighbourhood plan policy N3P5 makes no mention of any to do this. So I think that's quite a good steer, that if an application comes in for 3 bedrooms and an office, you have to take that on face value that that's what it is. It's 3 bedrooms and office, and can't take the view that, well, that office may become a bedroom in the future. It's just I hadn't seen that quite as clearly in an inspector's decision before, so I think that that's quite useful. Higher saw is the conversion of what the inspector can describe as a dilapidated building, that said that and such dilapidated buildings do add to the charm of the rural area, and the conversion of it the design would fundamentally change the utilitarian character of the building, and the outcome would be a visually muddled building with poor design quality. So there's no surprise that they concluded that it would detract from the character and appearance of the area. And finally, and I'll bring this up so members who weren't aware of it, I think you'll be surprised with this one. So this is the site of can you see that screen okay? This is the site of a permission in principle application in Hope Cove at Weymouth Park. Officers took the view that the loss of this green space in the residential area provided relief within the urban environment and was integral to the character and openness of this part of the estate. The inspector didn't agree and thought it was acceptable to grant permission for a single dwelling on that piece of land. While I get my notes on Hayes Barton, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, can I? You missed out one that's not actually been come to appeal yet that I've been watching. It's one where that sort of issue. I know the issues on that particular subject on the Vincent Tractors one.
Yeah.
Just on page 105.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I made some comments about our joint local plan is letting down the farming community somewhat because of that particular situation. To be interesting to see what the inspector has to say about that one. I agree. Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens, but I'm watching that one.
Yeah, again, at the moment there's nothing to report because we haven't got the decision back yet. But it'll be interesting to see what the inspector goes. If other appeal decisions have to go by, I suspect the inspector is likely to give significant weight to the policy of the local plan. And I suspect then that the concerns that you've previously raised will probably need to be taken up with the next review of the local plan. But we'll see what the inspector says. I'm certainly not going to prejudge how an inspector is going to determine an appeal. I gave up on that probably about 25 years ago.
I wouldn't ask you to do that, Pat. That's not. I'm just saying. Interested to see how it pans out. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. The Hayes Barton one. The key consideration was whether there was a conflict with the spatial strategy that justified the council pursuing a local connection restriction. Becky, I don't know whether you want to come in at any point on this one as well, because you know it quite well. The appeal found that because the proposed site was within the built form of the village and broadly met the requirements of SPT2, the local connection was not justified because there was no demonstrable conflict with specific policy. I think this appeal has given us, or certainly given us and the policy team some thought around it, and I know there's going to be a briefing coming out to members on how we will take this forward. Becky, is there anything you'd like to add on that one, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Thanks.
So unless there's any other questions, members, that's the appeals.
Thanks.
Can I just ask a question, Pat? Going on from that, Pat, I don't know what the policy is on including photographs on the agenda reports, but I do find it would be helpful. Like on Monday, we had an awful lot to plough through, and there were some aerial photographs of the sites, which were of those two main sites which were fine for what those needed, I think, and they're such significant applications. I'd be very happy to go to the look up the application if I wanted further photographs. But I wonder on ones like the one in Salcombe we've had this afternoon, whether it would be possible just to attach 1 or 2 photographs so that we can get an idea of what we're looking at, because I think there were plans, but there were no photographs in the report, and it would be very helpful rather than having to go off and divert to look up the whole report, the whole application documents. If 1 or 2 photographs could be included, if it's appropriate, is that possible?
I'll look into that. My gut feeling is it's going to be quite difficult because we don't print off agendas, they're electronic. Inevitably, as soon as you start putting photographs in there, the size of the document gets quite significant, and whether that will then cause problems with for individuals opening the document, because just simply the size of it, I'd need to speak to IT about it, but that would be my hesitation, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd be very happy if it would be possible. Just one, for example, that front-on view we had of the house would have been very helpful to get an idea of the whole issues there.
But presumably the photographs are on the.
Yeah, you have to go and look for them. I had to go and look for them, and they were actually, and sometimes they're listed as photographs, and in this case they were attached to the planning application, which they aren't always. So you have to know where to look as well.
The vast majority now should be indexed as photographs on the website. If they're not, then let me know and I can make sure they are, but they should be indexed on the.
Yeah, just on that one they weren't. Yeah, they're on under, but I found them under the application. But it's still, if it would be possible, that'd be great. If not, I understand.
Okay, I'm just nervous about just simply the size of the document, the electronic document, that then makes it can then take quite a long time to open it, and obviously it's not just for yourselves, it's also for any members of the public who are trying to look at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
Chair, I was just going to say on those ones, particularly where it's conservation area, if you've got a heritage impact assessment, that's the best place to look first, I think, Councillor Panel. I'm sure you did, but
thank you, Becky.
The first top tip I'd give you if we can't do it the other way.
Thank you.
Right. Any more members? No, can't see any there. So, right, if we move on to agenda item 8, which is the performance indicators. Pat, you again.
It is. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll be as quick as I can. The top 2 graphs, so P1 and P2, show where we are with major applications on target and non-major applications on target. The top 2 graphs are with agreed time extensions. The bottom 2 graphs are without. I'm personally uncomfortable with where we are with those. I'd like I'd like our performance to get a little bit better on the non-majors without an extension of time, but that's we gradually we've had an increase in resource, so hopefully that will start to show dividends. It's the P7, P8, and P9 are all to do with workload. We've pretty much since last June we've had an upturn in application numbers. So you see, with the exception of 2 months, with the exception of August and February, we've had more applications in 2021. We had more applications in 2021 than in 1920. It was from our point of view, it was a significant increase. As such, the planning workload is slightly higher, although I'm pleased that the actual numbers are, the increase is less than the increase in numbers we've had in, so we're relatively keeping on top of it. And then you can see from the number of applications determined, that's across most of the time over the last 6 months has been higher than previously. I'll happily answer any questions on this slide before I move to the next one. Sorry, this slide. No. Okay. I'll move on. Apologies for the text box in this, and I don't know why this happens. So the fee income from planning applications, you won't be surprised to learn it is no. You will. Sorry. Whilst this is the bizarre thing. Whilst we've had an upturn in applications by about 11%, the fee income was less, and the reason for that is since the adoption of the joint local plan, the number of speculative applications that we receive that we used to get when we didn't have a 5-year supply, where they're larger applications with big fees, those have dried up, not quite understandably, and from a planning perspective, that's a good thing because we're now delivering development in accordance with our adopted policies, but there is a knock-on effect that we don't get those big application fees anymore, so that's a slight concern. The fee income from pre-apps are still coming in quite strongly, and the fee income is still quite strong. And then the bottom line is the pre-applications received. So you can see there's been a bit of an upturn in March, but if you look at the numbers overall, they're pretty similar between 1920 and 2021. The workload again has been pretty steady. The numbers of pre-apps closed has gone up because we've now got an additional officer, additional part-time officer working on pre-apps alongside Lucy Hall. So there's Lucy Hall and Claire Stewart both doing pre-apps. So there's more getting dealt with in a speedier time than there were before. Happy if I move on? Okay. And finally, of the three enforcement graphs. So you'll notice that in the last quarter of 2021, there was a significant upturn in the number of enforcement cases received, but the flip side to that, there was also a significant upturn in the number of cases closed. So the overall number of enforcement cases outstanding is still on a downward trajectory at the moment. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions on those PIs.
Members, any questions? No, I mean, obviously we've got a review on enforcement coming up to executive, I think.
Yeah, it's not just enforcement, Chair, it's DM and enforcement.
Okay. Right. All right, no, I think everyone's happy with that. So Pat, move on to agenda item 9.
Again, rather than going through this, Chair, I'll happily answer any questions on it.
Members, if you've got any questions, I mean, I hope when you look at that, it's more for noting, and if you do pick up any in your patch, if you make sure you get in touch with Pat, probably before the meeting, or with the officer who's in charge, just so we know what's going on. Do members have any questions? Anything to say on that? No. In which case, I will bring the formal meeting to a close. Thank you all very much. Thank you to members of the public that are still there.